Snow fell in thick silence, blanketing the streets of Detroit in white as street lamps flickered under the weight of the wind. The temperature had dropped well below freezing, and most people had already retreated into the warmth of their homes. Through the icy gusts and dim alleys, a small figure moved steadily forward, barely visible against the city's harsh winter night. She couldn't have been older than 10. Her sneakers were soaked through, the solace worn down so thin that the cold seeped in with every step. Her jacket, far too large for her tiny frame, flapped with every gust of wind. It had a broken zipper, so she held it closed tightly with one hand, the other gripping the bundled baby swaddled in a thin pink blanket. Her sister, no older than a few months, was silent whether from the cold or from exhaustion. No one could say. The girl's breath puffed out in short, ragged clouds as she approached the glowing lights of the only corner store still open past 10 p.m. The faded sign above the glass doors buzzed, flickering every few seconds like it too wanted to rest for the night. But she pushed through the door anyway, a small bell jingling overhead, alerting the cashier and a few late shoppers. The warmth hit her like a wall, fogging up her glasses and sending a wave of contrast through her frozen limbs. She paused just inside the entrance, blinking at the sudden brightness, her eyes scanning the aisles. No one paid her much attention, just a kid from the neighborhood, probably up to nothing good. She ignored the stares, adjusted the baby on her hip, and moved forward with quiet purpose. She didn't wander. She didn't browse. She walked straight to the refrigerated section at the back, where the gallon jugs of milk were lined up in neat rows. She stood there, staring at them, not reaching for one, yet just staring. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out what she had: 1 crumpled dollar bill and 5 coins, 3 nickels, 1 penny and a dime. She laid them all out in her palm and counted silently. 15 cents short, her lips pressed into a tight line. The baby stirred against her chest, letting out a soft whimper. The girl's eyes filled with urgency. She couldn't leave without the milk. She couldn't go home and let her sister cry all night. There was nothing else in that apartment, no formula, no food, no adults. Just an empty fridge and a little girl trying to keep her sister alive. She looked around the store. Her eyes settled on a tall man in a dark overcoat standing in line at the counter. He looked important, well-dressed, holding a leather wallet in one hand and a phone in the other. His coat looked expensive. His shoes shined even under the dim grocery lights. The girl walked toward him slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from fear but from pride. She didn't want to beg. She didn't want pity. But she had no choice tonight. She stood behind him for a moment, rehearsing the words in her head. Then, softly, she tapped his sleeve. He turned around. Puzzled, his brows lifted when he saw her. She swallowed hard, then spoke. Sir, she said, voice shaking only slightly. I don't have enough money for milk. I only have this much, but I promise I'll pay you back when I grow up. The store fell into a sudden, eerie silence. The cashier looked up. A woman near the bread aisle stopped walking. Even the buzz of the sign outside seemed to pause. Everyone heard her, those small, fragile words spoken with such certainty. She wasn't whining. She wasn't pleading. She was making a vow. The man stared at her, stunned. Not by her appearance, not even by the baby in her arms, but by that one line. I'll pay you back when I grow up. No one said a word. No one moved. The girl waited not with desperation, but with dignity. As if she truly meant to fulfill that promise, no matter how many years it would take. The man blinked, looking down at the little girl standing in front of him. She didn't waver. Her chin was slightly raised, her arm still firmly around the baby, as if the cold and the stares of strangers couldn't touch her. He crouched slowly, lowering himself to her level, careful not to startle her. What's your name? He asked gently, his voice low so only she could hear. Kaisha, she replied, her eyes steady. He nodded, slowly taking in the full picture, the trembling lips, the frost clinging to the baby's blanket, The way her fingers were red from the cold curled tight around the corner of her coat. He reached out and took the gallon of milk from her small hands. My name's Mr. Harlan, he said. And you don't owe me anything. Kaisha's lips parted, about to speak, but he held up a hand. You made a promise, and I believe. That's enough for me. Then, without another word, he stood up, turned toward the counter, and placed not just the milk on the belt, but also a box of baby formula, a loaf of bread, peanut butter, a small jar of jam, and a pack of diapers. Kaisha's eyes widened. She opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. Mr. Harlan handed the cashier a crisp $100 bill and didn't bother waiting for change. He took the bag from the counter and walked back to the girl, holding it out to her. She hesitated. I didn't ask for all that, I know, he said. But sometimes we don't get what we ask for, we get what we need. She took the bag slowly, staring at it like it was some magical thing, her hands shaking not from cold. Now, but from disbelief, the warmth of real food? The weight of help. Mr. Harlan knelt again and looked into her eyes. Take this home. Keep your sister warm. Feed her. One day, when you're ready, pay it forward. Kaisha nodded, slowly, silently. Then she turned, adjusted the baby against her shoulder, and walked back into the snow. No goodbye. No thank you, just quiet. Footsteps disappearing into the dark. Mr. Harlan stood at the store's entrance for a long while, watching the small figure move farther away until she vanished into the night like smoke. Around him, the world resumed its rhythm. The cashier cleared her throat, the next customer moved forward, and the door's chime jingled again as someone else walked in, but inside Mr. Harlan. Something had shifted, that night he went home. To his condo, a high-rise in the heart of the city, where warmth was never a concern and the fridge was always full. But when he stood in front of the fireplace, a glass of wine untouched in his hand, all he could think about was the girl's voice. I promise I'll pay you back when I grow up. It wasn't about the money. That part was easy. It was about something deeper, something buried in her tone, her eyes, her silence afterward. She had nothing, but she still had dignity. She still believed in honoring a promise. Even if the world hadn't given her much to start with, the next morning, he made phone calls, he called his lawyer. Asked about setting up a fund, something that didn't require a name, just a placeholder. Kaisha's gift wouldn't work. Too personal. He wanted something quiet, untraceable, private. He called it the Promise Fund. A trust seated, with $50,000 marked for any child in need, to be accessed by someone who demonstrated the same kind of promise he saw in her. Then he called his assistant and asked her to start building connections with local shelters, schools, and after-school programs. He didn't know if he'd ever see Kaisha again, but if she ever came back, if she ever searched for him, the door would be open. Not for charity, for a return on belief. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings and deadlines, but Kaisha never left his mind. She became a thought that lingered at the back of everything, her quiet determination. Her cold red hands, her voice saying she would pay him back. He hadn't expected that moment to follow him, but it did, and something in him wanted it to. 15 years passed. The city changed. Buildings went up, neighborhoods shifted, and the old corner grocery store was replaced by a chain pharmacy. Mr. Harlan's company grew, expanding from regional real estate into national development. He became a name in boardrooms, magazines, and philanthropic circles. But despite all the success, despite every gala and every photo op, there were moments, quiet moments, where the memory of a little girl in a tattered coat returned to him. Like a whisper, sometimes late at night. As he looked out from his office window over the glowing city, he would wonder if she'd made it, if she had eaten that night, if she'd stayed warm, if the baby had grown up safe. He wondered if the trust fund he created would ever find its way to her. Then, one rainy Thursday afternoon, his secretary's voice buzzed through the intercom. Mr. Harlan, there's someone here to see you. She says she doesn't have an appointment, but she mentioned milk. His hand froze mid-signature. Milk. Asterisk. He set his pen down slowly and stood up, his heart suddenly racing in a way it hadn't in years. He opened the office door, and there she was. Keisha, he recognized. Her instantly, not because she looked the same, but because of the eyes. Those same steady, unflinching eyes. The little girl was now a grown woman, poised in a modest but professional suit, hair pulled back, a folder in one hand, and a bag slung over her shoulder. For a moment they simply stared at each other. Then she spoke. Asterisk. I told you I'd pay you back, she said. Her voice richer now, but carrying the same quiet strength. Asterisk. Mr. Harlan took a slow step forward. You remembered. Asterisk. I never forgot, she replied. Not the store, not the cold, not your face, and not the promise I made. Asterisk. She explained how that night changed everything. How the groceries gave her more than food. They gave her a chance to breathe, to survive. The baby her sister was, now thriving, a straight-A student in high school. Keisha herself had worked her way through school, then college, then graduate studies. She had studied business, driven by the memory of the man who had invested in her without knowing her name. Asterisk. I looked for you, she said. Took me years to connect the dots. But once I found your company and saw what you were doing, I had to come. Asterisk. He guided her into the office, and for the next hour they talked not as benefactor and recipient, but as equals. She showed him a folder with a proposal to expand access to educational grants in underserved neighborhoods. It was detailed, structured, driven by data, and full of heart. Asterisk. I'm not asking for a donation, she told him. I'm asking for a seat at the table. Mr. Harlan leaned back in his chair, deeply moved. You're already at the table, he said. I've been waiting for you. Asterisk. Months later, Keisha was sitting beside him at board meetings, not as a favor, not as a token, but as a visionary. She spearheaded the revival of the Promise Fund, turning it into a full nonprofit with a mission to invest in promising youth from overlooked communities. She traveled across the country, speaking at schools, community centers, and youth events. Asterisk. Each time she shared her story. Not to embarrass herself, but to honor the power of a single moment. Asterisk. She would look out at the crowd and say, it started with 15 cents and a promise. I didn't ask for charity, I asked for a chance. And a stranger gave me that. Now it's my turn. Asterisk. Years later, a young boy in a tattered hoodie stood in a similar grocery store, his little sister at his side, holding nothing but a handful of change and too much pride. And just like that night long ago, someone stepped forward, not because he begged, but because he reminded them of something they used to be. Asterisk. And so the promise lived on, not in words, not in coins, but in action. Asterisk. A legacy passed from hand to hand, heart to heart. Asterisk. Because sometimes the smallest voice in the room carries the weight of a future waiting to unfold.